So Anthony, I've had the pleasure of reading your book, and I must say I thoroughly enjoyed it. The last book I read before yours was Ride of a Lifetime, written by the ex-CEO of Disney, Robert Iger. And I can say yours is on par in terms of learnings and enjoyment. Writing a book is something I've often thought about, as I would love to share my experiences in business. But it's a big project requiring considerable time and energy. So let's start off by talking about why it is that you decided to write this book.
So really it was about October 2019, and I finally decided to put some of my thoughts, some of the things that I'd learnt about running and building businesses down on paper. And realistically, it took about 6 months for me to actually get my act together. So it was really about March 2020 before things from a universal perspective lined up a bit, and I was able to start really getting serious about it. Fortunately, it meant that it took about 6 weeks to go from that stall of, oh gee, there's a good idea here, to actually having something that was readable and ultimately publishable. So it was fantastic to know that this time last year, I was putting pen to paper, and over the course of a couple of months, had something out in the hands of people ready to read, and it seemed appropriate at the time, so titled the book, Scaling Your Business in Unpredictable Times.
Geez, that's a short period of time to bring it all together.
Yeah, it kind of flowed. Once I got my act together and started really thinking about things, it's one of those things in business. It's about once you put the intention there with your attention, things start to happen.
So true. Very impressive.
Thank you.
I learned something new about you in this book, and that is you're a civil engineer by trade. To be honest, I didn't realise you could build things other than businesses.
Yeah, so I did my degree down in Wollongong. I loved doing my degree, but I quite quickly realised that I'd much rather be working with people rather than crawling through sewer pipes 35 metres underground. So I made the decision to head off overseas, and since then I've been running and building businesses across a variety of different industries, across a couple of different countries. However, there was always that constant theme of looking to put in place some systems, some processes, some structure to help the people that I was surrounding myself with get on and do the things that I was asking them to do. So I guess the engineer in me still found ways in which it could come out, even though I wasn't actually doing engineering work.
Fantastic. One of the things that resonated with me was the fracture of your long-term friendship with your business partner. And with the help of EOS operating system, you were able to not only get the business back on track, but more importantly, your friendship. I know how important it can be because I've been in business with my best friend and brother in the past with our back against the wall. And I can tell you we were lucky enough to have implemented an operating system that allowed us a framework to have the conversations that needed to be had in a constructive way that also protected our friendship. Can you talk about the strain business put on your friendship and how you were able to correct both your business and friendship using EOS?
Yeah, so it was about 8 years ago that things had actually reached a bit of a crisis point in the business. My business partner certainly had some things going on in his personal life that was flowing through into the business, and unfortunately some of the stuff that was happening in the business was impacting him negatively as well. And so we actually made a decision to step out of the business, got an external person in to start running the business on our behalf. On paper that sounded like a fantastic idea. The reality is also an absolute train wreck. Without boring everyone with details on that, after 2 years we decided to conclude that experiment, we'll call it that for a better term,
right,
and step back into the business. Over that time, my business partner had been able to work on some things, but more importantly, we'd been able to really figure out that the business was absolutely essential for both of us. We had both personally invested a lot into it, and we both wanted to make it work. So we were able to use that as a bit of a rallying point to start working together on that thing. So that brought us together closer a little bit, but as a result of making then the call to implement EOS and put that in place across the business and seeing the phenomenal results that we got within the organisation, that not only reduced stress in the business, we stepped back from financial ruin, it also enabled us to give our friendship the time and space that it needed to be able to work far, far better and get it back to the point where it was a healthy, thriving thing, not a shadow of its former self. And I'm really pleased to say that 4 years after those changes, we're still going strong, and if anything, we're even tighter than what we've ever been. So it's great.
That's amazing.
And changing, getting our business working well has had a significant and really deep and meaningful personal impact for us.
I think that's probably the most important thing of all, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Friendship's intact, better than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And I mean, the outcome could have been a lot different by the sounds of it.
Totally, and there was a couple of points there where it was looking like going down that path. Fortunately, we recognised that it was far too important for both of us, and so we were able to make some changes and fix things.
Fantastic. In your first chapter, I've worked hard to build my own team, but they aren't performing to my expectations. You talk about entrepreneurs and CEOs that say they don't think they have the right team, however, do very little in terms of having a conversation with the existing team, or even working out and documenting exactly what it is that they want from their team. I was reminded of just how expensive staff turnover can be, when in many cases things can be rectified by just having, as you describe, a constructive conversation. Can you explain the importance of having that conversation and what a constructive conversation entails?
It never ceases to amaze me the number of conversations I have with business owners about the problems in their leadership teams that actually are really just poor communication on the business owner's behalf.
Right.
You know, people are afraid, or they're very comfortable with having a conversation with me, talking about all the issues and the problems they've got. But whenever I say, so what did that person say when you spoke with them about it? There's invariably a deathly silence going, what do you mean? I've got to talk to them about this? Can't I just get in your ear and you're going to make it magically disappear? And you know, I'm not there to solve people's problems on their behalf. I work with people helping them solve their own problems. And sometimes that's really, really appealing. Other times that's really, really difficult for people to actually get their head around. But ultimately, it's about having the courage to just sit down and have a conversation with someone and say, look, this is what I'm seeing. Are you aware of the things that, the way in which you're behaving? It's actually having this impact. 82% of business owners have issues around people. So this is clearly a standard problem that everyone's got. So you'd think that just the ability to be able to talk to each other without any baggage, without any loaded questions or anything like that, would just enable people to actually cut through, get to what the real issue is and seek about solving it. Ultimately, if people have got the greater good in mind, which from my context is best for the business.
Sure.
If people bring that perspective into a conversation, it shouldn't be about personality, it shouldn't be about you as an individual. It's about what are we going to do collectively to improve this situation? Because the way things are going right now, it's not working for either of us, and most importantly, it's not working for the business. So what can we do to change this? So bringing that perspective in can reframe the conversation, and as a result, you're far more likely to get a resolution that's going to help the business and help the people.
Anthony, in Chapter 1, under the heading Best Mate Syndrome, you talk about family members being dotted throughout an organisation. I've recently witnessed how this can cause internal chaos if a family member isn't performing to certain standards. I won't go into details, but needless to say, it was a very difficult situation for the person involved. What advice do you have for business owners that have family members that are simply not performing to acceptable standards? How do you manage improvements in their performance or manage them out of the business if necessary, without having destructive effects on the relationship?
Yeah, there's really three different components. Family businesses are a very tricky dynamic because we all bring all of our baggage into the conversation, sometimes not really able to separate between being related to someone to actually working with them or working for them. So it really comes down to three separate things. First off, wearing the owner's hat, understanding what's going on in the business from an external perspective. If we work together, we will increase the value of our asset together. Secondly, then there's a manager-employee hat. These are the things that need to be done in the business to actually help run the business. And these are the things we're expecting you to do as an employee of the business to actually get that stuff done. And then lastly, or probably third and most importantly, there's we're family members. We've got your back. We can have a tough conversation about you not doing your job properly, then step out of the room and give you a hug and say, yeah, how was your day? It was a really tough one. That was a really tough conversation. So no doubt about it, family businesses are a very tough dynamic, but when you get it right, it's magical because we've got so much vested interest, alignment, passion. That's what enables family businesses to really, really shine.
Yeah. And I'd say percentage-wise, there'd have to be a large portion of small businesses that have at least some family involvement.
Absolutely.
Whether it not, it might be a family member, even just doing the accounts for the business as an example.
Yeah,
but
and look at all the tradie businesses where invariably there's if there's a husband and wife stereotype there, but if the husband is the tradie, the wife's making sure that the business is actually running well from behind the scenes, making sure the money's being looked after. I've got a lot of clients, a lot of friends that are exactly that situation, and the businesses are better as a result of having that dynamic, but it's also can be really straining on that relationship when they're at loggerheads about business things and they don't have the ability to recognise, okay, we walk into that room, we're wearing that hat, we step out of that room, we're wearing a different hat. We're husband and wife, we're partners, whatever. So being able to make what can be a tricky mental adjustment, making that seamless can go a long way to improving harmony within a relationship and ultimately getting things done better in a business.
in Chapter 2, I have a handle on my basic numbers, but I don't feel in complete control of where the business is going. Revenue, 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 denial, denial, denial. I thought this was a really interesting case study, mate. Would you mind explaining to everyone the story about this particular client?
Yeah, I found myself in a situation where I was talking with the head of finance for a particular business, and she was emphatic that our revenue's healthy, that's all that matters. I think she may have been one of those people that found herself in a situation because she wanted to help, not necessarily because she had the skills and capability, the background to actually be able to do that. So as a result, we had to go through and compile the numbers to actually have a really good hard look at what was going on in the business, and very much from a forward indicators, forward leading numbers, the activities we're doing today that are generating the results we need tomorrow to be able to help both her and the rest of the leadership team understand a true state of the health of the business.
Right.
So from a personal perspective, I lived and breathed an example where I perceived that revenue was the be all and end all.
Right.
I won't throw anyone under the bus, but we were a very proud member of the Hall of Fame of the BRW Fast 100.
Wow.
The criteria for that was revenue growth.
Okay.
But during that journey of achieving that accolation, that nomination, that recognition 4 times in a row, we began to realise that revenue was all about vanity. It was actually profit was where it was really important, and ultimately it's about getting the cash in the door. So by shifting our focus, we actually stopped caring about the headline numbers and actually started caring about the bottom line numbers.
Right. In Chapter 3, I've grown my business to a level I never thought possible, and I wonder if I'm the right person to scale it from here. You say, like the cult of celebrity, there is a tendency to buy into the cult of business too. To look at the supposedly greener grass when there's really nothing to look at whatsoever. This statement jumped out at me, and I think it's really interesting because I believe many people compare how they are doing and their level of success with what they see from others on Facebook and LinkedIn. And in many cases, it's causing anxiety and depression in people. So Anthony, how does the cult of business play out in the business world?
Yeah, there's no doubt whatsoever that people spend far too much time caring about what the socials are saying about people, and human nature will always try to paint the best version of themselves in such an environment. So you don't actually see the reality of what's truly going on in that individual's life or in that business. Marketing teams are there intentionally creating the best version of themselves. So as a result, if people are measuring themselves and their business success against this unobtainable benchmark, that invariably is going to mean feelings of dissatisfaction, bordering into depression, anxiety, fear. As a result, that begins to manifest out in businesses. They lose their mojo, they lose their way, any momentum they have gets squandered, and so as a result, they ultimately grind themselves into the dirt, all because they're trying to hold themselves to this imaginary ideal.
Yeah.
So for myself, it's far more important that people begin to focus on the journey they've come from and how far they've got from where they started. Very, very important that we have long-term targets and goals because we need to be growing towards things. But whenever I'm talking about people about their journey so far, it's as important to think about the gain as it is about the gap of where what we're yet to achieve.
Sure. Yeah, quite often I have noticed in the past with LinkedIn in particular, when somebody does actually put a post up that details some of the trials and tribulations that they've been having in a small business, I quite often find that I see people really gravitate towards that level of honesty, because so often it's all about the awards. You know, people put up posts about the awards or the things that they've achieved, but not so much about what it took to actually get to that particular point in time. And we're all along there for that ride. So I think a lot of people do tend to gravitate towards those particular posts. I see a lot of activity around that, like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm going through the same thing right now. So it's quite interesting.
Absolutely. And to be truly using those platforms in an authentic way, that's certainly a buzzword, but a genuine way. You need to be showing both the positives and the negatives. So
I agree.
The pain you're going through, as well as the joy you're experiencing from achieving success.
Absolutely. Then everyone can learn from one another.
Absolutely, yeah.
Anthony, in chapter 5, I'm a starter creating new ideas to move my business forward, but my team often doesn't get things done the way I want. You talk about some of the crazy things that you've seen CEOs do. I found some of these so funny. I really got the visuals when reading about them. If you don't mind, I'm just going to read one of the examples. I know of a CEO who marched into a sales room and announced that he could easily outsell the rest of the sales team. He then conducted a sales call that contravened every single rule laid down by the firm for ethical selling, much to the cringing amazement of the rest of the sales team. Then, making things 10 times worse, our desperate CEO celebrated like a footy star when he got what can only be politely described as a missold deal. What's even crazier is that knowing this deal would ultimately fall through because it was conducted utterly inappropriately, our CEO documents absolutely nothing and then mic drops the phone and marches out of the office like Conor McGregor after a belt-winning victory. That's really impressive, but what's one of the other craziest things that you've seen a CEO do?
Yeah, an example that immediately comes to mind is the story of a CEO who's walked into the customer service area, wanting to spend some time on the phones, talking with clients, getting in touch with the real people. Yeah, and so another absolute train wreck of a call where someone's, once again, completely disregarded the processes that they had actually themselves put in place, made a whole bunch of promises around customer service, turnaround time, completely circumventing any sort of system to be able to follow up, then had the hide to give the customer service rep that they interrupted and took over the call from an absolute tearing up in front of the rest of the team for not really caring about customer service, leaving that person basically in tears and then wandering out going, oh, I'm surrounded by Muppets.
You're kidding.
It's not okay. It's not fair on anyone. The customer's been given a misguided understanding that at any point in time they can talk to the CEO so they can get their problem solved. That person has just had their career torn apart and they're throwing their heart and soul into trying to do a good job, but the CEO's just lobbed in, kicked them around, and then just wandered off as though nothing has actually happened.
What is it with some people? I'm completely dumbfounded as to how some people actually obtain the roles that they do within businesses.
Yeah, and it can sometimes just be as simple as things are working well, people are used to building and fixing problems. When there's no problems to actually fix, they go create some problems so they can step in to fix them.
Yeah.
So it's one of those.
You do see that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that can be one of the challenges of working with entrepreneurs, getting to the point where things are working well and then actually enabling them to step out of that business to move into a new project, a new problem to solve, leaving this one to run well.
Sure. Also in chapter 5, one of the topics is awkward conversations. And I think for me, Anthony, one of the things I took from the book, as it was a theme that was present throughout, is the importance of communication. I find it really interesting that despite people really wanting to communicate their true feelings, a lot of the time they're unable. And as a coach and a mentor, you have to intervene and ask those questions, the questions that others are not prepared to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us an example of when you've had to do this and the ultimate effect this has had within the business?
Yeah, so a client comes to mind where we've had a situation where there's 5 owners of the business and they also happen to comprise the leadership team. Yeah, so a business that over a period of time had brought in some additional people and wanting to get their team skin in the game.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So made a messy ownership structure, but more importantly, it meant that people had this completely mixed understanding of whenever they were sitting around a table, what was the conversation they were actually having. As a result, there were some performance issues going on with a particular individual who also happened to be an owner, but no one could actually figure out how they could have the conversation without everything theoretically going pear-shaped.
It's a tough one.
The reality is that by not doing anything about that situation, things were going pear-shaped.
Sure.
So we were together working through some things, and I could see there was this tension and things seemed to be leading towards having a conversation, but no one was interested in opening the door. It was that point in time that I reached over to my trusty sidekick, Ellie the elephant, a little stuffed toy that I have, and it always brings a smile to people, and initially people go, oh, well, that's a bit lame, but invariably, as a result of Ellie getting in, it helps break the ice. It enabled the person who had the responsibility for running the business to actually be able to turn around to that other peer and say, look, we've got a problem. We can't fix this unless we actually talk about the situation and do something about it. And then as a result, they had a very effective, constructive 45-minute discussion that not only involved themselves, but also the rest of the leadership team in a caring, supportive way, not an all pile on to the guy that was getting picked on. It was about, right, how are we going to fix this? Ultimately, that person did end up leaving the business about 5 months later,
really?
But only as a result of them finding the courage to say, we need to have this conversation. Another thing that happened actually as a result of that conversation was the original founder of the business said, look guys, this business is running so well, the fact that we can actually have these conversations means that things are finally in a place where I can actually step out of the day-to-day running of the business. So 5 people in the leadership team at the beginning of the day, 3 people effectively at the end of the day. So fundamental changes in the way in which the business was running, but ultimately things were better off. Those individuals were in a better place.
Absolutely. Do you find that in most cases that fear of having the conversation is completely unfounded?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the fear of what will happen, what may happen if, which once you actually start speaking, getting the words out, invariably coming from the heart, it's going to work out. It will work out for the best.
Yeah.
That might sound a little bit hippy dippy, but if people's intentions are right, things will work out.
Right.
Sometimes, however, it doesn't. What it means to work out doesn't mean that everyone's still employed in the business.
Right. Isn't it funny that the fear of not saying something or not having that constructive conversation is quite often pushed aside, and the fear of having the conversation overrides that?
Yeah, totally. And people got far more outweighed with the immediate perception of, hey, that's an awkward situation, as opposed to the very evident deteriorating situation. There's more damage being done by not having the conversation, but that fear of being uncomfortable in a conversation outweighs that.
Thank God for Ellie. Chapter 7 is titled, I wonder if my attitude and behaviours are in some way negatively impacting my team and culture. Since becoming aware of the importance of the tone at the top, so to speak, back in around 2007, I made a conscientious effort to always ensure that I've set the right tone within an organisation. The reason for that is because I've seen firsthand just what a huge impact a negative attitude can have on the business and its culture. Anthony, to highlight this in your book, you reference one particular customer of yours, the headline being from all gone to all staying. Would you mind sharing with everyone the story behind this? Because I think it brilliantly illustrates just how important this concept is.
Yeah, what the words and actions of the person at the top, regardless of whether there's a leadership team in place or not, dictate the general tone and demeanour of an entire organisation. So found myself working with a client that his language, let me say, was colourful. His sense of humour was a bit offbeat, and there was no separation between what he was doing in his personal life and the way in which he was behaving in the office. So his staff had no idea how to take him, and the environment in which he was inadvertently creating was one where they were extremely uncomfortable being. So literally they were all going. At a point in time, he had complete turnover of his entire team in a 6-month period. So Jeez. That's really hard work to find people to come back in. Absolutely debilitating for any momentum and forward projection for the business, and such a waste of time, effort and money to actually be doing that, having to continue to replace people that his unintended behaviour and his unaware behaviour was causing. So as a result,
he had no idea that that's why people were leaving.
Yeah, and if anything, as a result of people leaving, his language was getting even more colourful about what was going on in the business, and so that was creating a very vicious cycle of turning people over left, right and centre. No one, though, had the courage to actually say, hey mate, I'm leaving because of this.
The fear again of having that conversation.
Yeah, they'd come up with a whole bunch of different reasons as to why they were leaving.
They'd rather leave than even have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I, however, was in a position where I could see that, particularly coming in on a regular basis. I could see, hey, what's going on here? Okay, this is what's happening.
Sure.
Mate, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but this is actually truly what's going on here. This is my perception of what's going on. Has anyone spoken with you about it? No, they haven't, but okay, I think you're right, by the way. As a result, he modified his behaviour. He didn't stop being himself.
Sure.
But he was actually able to put in place some barriers between his personal life and what's happening in the business. As a result, we were able to get a solid core of people around him, and now, pleased to say that business is absolutely bursting at the seams. They're at capacity. Their biggest challenge at the moment is dealing with the amount of work that they've got coming their way, which is testament to they had a good business, but it was just the behaviour of an individual who was completely changing everything.
It's a great example again of why I think it's so important to have an external set of eyes looking into a business and also engaging within the business. In this case, it was you, and lucky for him, because he might not have had a business.
I don't want to blow my own horn, but there most definitely would not. The direction that business was going in, there's no way it would have been able to change direction and fix itself without a fundamental change in the way in which things were being done.
No, you can't have a revolving door with the staff in and out.
Definitely not.
Chapter 8, every day seems more like a blur because of all of the fires I'm putting out, preventing me from working on the highest level priorities to grow the business. In this chapter, you talk about asking your clients to imagine that 3 years has passed and where is the business now? This seems like such a simple exercise, but it's amazing how powerful it can be. And you got me thinking about where I want CWC Club to be in 3 years. So it does naturally have that effect of having you start to write down and map out what it's going to take for you to get there. One of the things that you discuss in this chapter is skill amnesia. I found this really interesting. Can you explain exactly what this is and how it plays out for someone in business?
Skill amnesia is a bit of a term around people who've got so bogged down in doing the day-to-day things, they're proficient at their skills, the things that they're doing, that they're forgetting about their passion, their drive, why they actually got into business in the first place. Highly likely it wasn't to actually just create a job for themselves. They wanted to create something and create a business to actually deliver on that particular thing. So we talk about looking out into the future, looking 3 years, 10 years, 35 years out. But until you can actually get out of the rut that you're in, that can seem absolutely impossible to even contemplate. So helping people drag themselves out from the day-to-day that they're in and gives them some time and some space, the capacity to actually begin to think about what's possible. and to remind themselves of what they saw in the first place, of when they had that entrepreneurial fit to say, I'm going to go create this thing, I'm going to go set up this business, I actually want to fix this problem, I want to change the world.
Yeah, so that's what you refer to as the blur. Just you're into the day-to-day running of the business and you're really not looking outside anymore.
Totally. You know, whether you think about it's a total, everything's the same. It's like Groundhog Day because it's exactly the same problems over and over and over again. When you're just running around absolutely flat out, you fall into bed absolutely exhausted, drag yourself out the following day. That's no way to live. The business isn't benefiting, you're not benefiting. If you've got a family, they're not benefiting at all from having you just in this constant days of exhaustion.
And you're not in the right space to be thinking about, you're not even thinking about it tomorrow, let alone 3 or 4 or 5 years out, are you?
No, absolutely. And if anything, you're actually thinking about all the mistakes you made yesterday. So you're not even intentional on what the things that you're theoretically working on right this second. Yeah.
Amazing. Anthony, in chapter 9, I have a vision in my mind where the business needs to go, but I'm not sure if I should or can communicate that to my team and others. Like all chapters, there's lots of pieces of gold within, but I thought I'd ask you to share with us some more details around finding your why and how that will help you pivot, especially during these uncertain times.
Yeah, it's so important that you're getting the reason why you've created a business in the first place out of your head and sharing it with others. That can be pretty confronting. Sometimes people are afraid that what's going to happen if I actually share my real reason. You can wrap around, I want to make a whole bunch of money, I want to have a big house, fancy cars, all that sort of stuff. But why is it that you actually want to be doing those things? They're just end results of what potentially could be your passion, your purpose, the cause that you're actually looking to solve, the thing that drives you. And then we can talk about what you're doing to actually bring that to life. But actually taking the time to find your why. Simon Sinek said it so well starts with why in his transformative TED Talk and book and then things that have gone on from there. And when I watched that video, that fundamentally changed the way in which I was looking at my own business and particularly myself. And that started me on a journey that has ultimately led me to be where I am today. It was a pretty pivotal moment in my time. From looking at pivoting, there's been a lot of things, that's been a real buzzword over the last year or so with businesses shifting just to stay in existence. And just making sure that as you go through, there's a variety of organisations that are distilleries, for example, that have made the shift in our time of need to go from producing alcohol to producing hand sanitizer. And that was a great example of making a shift. Doesn't necessarily mean though that that's totally in sync with why they exist as a business. If the reason for the business is to help people have enjoyable lives, alcohol is obviously a key part of that, so that happens. Providing hand sanitizer could be also said that it's in sync with their why. They want to help people have enjoyable lives. We all need those things to cut down the spread of disease, and so as a result, that may be helping people have enjoyable lives.
Absolutely.
But one of the challenges we face is what's the right time to go down that path and potentially then come back to why we're actually doing and what we're actually doing to bring our true why to life. So it's okay sometimes to dabble in compelling, and extenuating circumstances, but people going down that path consistently to a variety of different things, that's just shiny ball stuff. That's people getting distracted, and ultimately their business won't be anywhere near as effective as what it could be when you actually stay focused and use that as the lens through which you're pursuing the opportunities. So getting clear on your why and what you're doing to bring that to life will simplify your life a lot.
In chapter 10, I'm pretty sure I can solve the majority of the business problems that I have on my own. I really don't need outside help. Now, I'm quoting directly from the book here. What always amazes me during that process is how often I come across companies who sell expert services but claim not to need them. It's a tragic irony that their entire sales process is built on selling solutions that their prospects could complete in-house, but they refuse expert help themselves when they could really use it. So as a business owner that has tried to do it all on their own and then had the experience of accepting outside help, I can say firsthand how incredible and transformational this can be for a business. As you say, Anthony, in this chapter, like all other businesses, you have to pitch and win new clients.
Absolutely. And so it can be really surprising when I'm talking with people that are clearly experts in their area, and just because they know how to do their thing, and I don't tell people what product they should have or what market they should be in. If they, however, do have that, I can help them actually put in place a business, the structure that their organisation needs to actually be able to deliver on the promises that they're out there making. Sometimes people feel that because they've got one part of the puzzle sorted, everything else is exactly the same and it all comes in. And it's just like a brain surgeon deciding, oh, well, I've heard this whole heart and lung stuff isn't really all that hard. Let's set up another thing. You laugh, but it's exactly that same thing. People wouldn't even contemplate, oh, well, there's a brain surgery. Oh, now they're doing heart and lung work. Oh, cool, I'll go there. No, it takes expertise, training, all that sort of stuff. There's a growing recognition that the acumen you need to be able to run a business well actually does take some skill, does take some time, does take some training. That I can help people get, but most importantly, they need to be wanting to actually get that help. A bit vulnerable and recognise that they don't know everything. They're good at what they do, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff to ensure that their business can be what they ultimately want it to be, that needs to be in place to help them get there.
Absolutely. You've given some examples today of businesses that sadly would not probably be around had you not intervened at a particular point in time, or had they not had the good sense to bring somebody like yourself in, an external consultant, to help them with some of the issues.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be asked to help some fantastic people, some fantastic businesses, but it absolutely has started with them going, you know what, I actually need some help here. I can't do it myself. We can't do it ourselves as a team. We need to be doing something differently, and I've been fortunate that I've been able to step in and provide some assistance with that.
There are absolute golden nuggets throughout this book, and I've only really pulled out the bits that stood out for me and based my questions around those. For each and everybody that reads this book, those golden nuggets are going to be different. So I'm really looking forward to everyone else reading this book and finding out what really stood out for them. I want to thank you, Anthony, for writing this book and for sharing your insights with us today.
My pleasure, Dave.